Hello Math 7 students, this is Circumference Practices Substitute. You're probably watching this video because you are practicing in class and there is a substitute, or perhaps you've been directed to watch this video because you need a little bit more practice to prepare for a retake. Whatever the situation is, we're going to get started today by reviewing the parts of a circle. In your notes, go ahead and draw a circle off to the side, just like I've done. As we draw that circle, we need to remember the different parts of the circle and how they're related. The first part of a circle is the radius, and the radius goes from the center of the circle to the edge. I'm going to label it R for short. That would be the radius. A diameter goes edge to edge, but it has to go through that center point. Notice that a diameter will be labeled D for diameter. And notice that a diameter is really just a radius going in one direction combined with a radius going in its complete opposite direction. It's a really important relationship because now that tells me that a radius doubled becomes a diameter. And that's the information that we need for this first part of this practice. Questions 1 through 6 say find the diameter of each circle. Show your work and round your answer to the nearest tenth. So if you take a look at all of these problems, 1 through 6, I am giving you a part of a circle that starts in the center and goes to the edge. Starts in the center, goes to the edge, and so on. In problems 5 and 6, I'm telling you that the part that I'm giving you is the radius. So in order to find that diameter, we first have to remember that a radius goes from center to edge, and a diameter is going to go edge to edge through the center. Again, that means that our diameter is 2 of a radius. So if I give you one single radius here on problem number 1, and the length is 6.5 meters, if I wanted to find the diameter, I would just need to go another 6.5 meters in the opposite direction, and that will make a diameter. In other words, the radius multiplied by 2 is equal to the diameter. So in this particular problem, the radius is 6.5. I take that radius, I double it, and I get the diameter. Go ahead and plug it into your calculators, or go ahead and do it in your head. 6.5 times 2 is equal to 13. So the diameter for this problem, the D for diameter, is equal to 13 meters. And you'll continue that for problems 2 through 6. Each time, remember to show your work. Showing your work means you're writing down something like the formula, R times 2 is equal to D. The radius doubled is the diameter. Maybe you're just writing down what it is that you're typing into your calculator, but I do need to see more than just 13 meters. Make sure you're showing your work by showing your thought process. Pause the video as you work on problems 2 through 6. Okay, let's keep going. The next set of problems say find the radius of each circle. Again, show your work, round your answer to the nearest tenth. This time, I need to find the radius, which means I'm probably not giving you the radius. I'm probably giving you a different piece of information within that circle. So again, let's review the parts of the circle. Radius goes center to edge. Diameter goes edge to edge, but through that center. So when I'm looking at problems 7 through 12 and I'm looking at what piece of information it's giving, I can see that this line goes from the edge through the center all the way to the other edge. So that means this 4.4 is the diameter. But I'm looking for the radius. So remember, the radius just goes from center to edge. So if all the way through, from edge to edge, it's 4.4, how will I find the radius, which only goes from center to edge? And again, that relationship is in the fact that the radius times 2 is equal to the diameter. So that means I can always work backwards and divide if I give you the diameter and I want to find the radius. So again, that means the diameter divided by 2 is equal to the radius. So here, this entire length is 4.4. I want just half of that. That's why I'm dividing it by 2. So I will take that 4.4, that is the diameter. I will divide it by 2. Type that into your calculator or do it in your head. And 4.4 divided by 2 is equal to 2.2. So again, that means the radius, the r, is equal to 2.2 inches. Again, showing your work is going to be perhaps writing down the formula, writing down what it is that you typed into your calculator, but I do want to see some sort of that thought process. You'll continue that same procedure for problems 8 through 12. Go ahead and pause the video as you work on problems 8 through 12. For our next set of problems, we're going to take a look at 13 and 14, where it says we are writing formulas for circumference. Let's go back to our circle and review all the parts that we know so far. We've already reviewed radius, which is the measurement from center to the edge. We've reviewed diameter, which goes from edge through the center to the opposite edge. The last measurable distance that we can talk about is the circumference. The circumference is the distance around the outside edge of a circle. It's also called the perimeter, but since circles are such special shapes, we give it a special name. The perimeter of a circle is called the circumference. You'll also remember from our previous lessons, when we have a diameter, if that diameter is flexible, it would take a little bit more than 3 diameters to go all the way around the whole circle. That exact amount that it would take is pi. In other words, if I had not just 3, but pi diameters, I could go all the way around the circle. So in question 13, I'm saying, well, what if I know that diameter? How can I find the circumference? And we've always written in words that we just take the diameter and multiply it by pi. But as we transition into being more sophisticated mathematicians, we get a little bit lazy and we don't always want to write that as a full sentence. That's where a formula comes in. A formula is just a shorter way of saying the same thing using math symbols. So if I have the diameter, I'm just going to take that diameter and multiply it by pi. When I do that, it gives me the circumference. And that's the formula for the circumference of a circle. D times pi is equal to c. Remember, mathematicians sometimes like to reverse things and rewrite them in a different order. So you will also very commonly see it as c is equal to d times pi. What if, instead of giving you the diameter, what if I gave you the radius? Could I still find the circumference? And again, it all goes back to recognizing the relationships. If I give you a radius, we can easily turn that radius into a diameter by doubling it, multiplying by 2. That's what we did here on this first set of problems. I gave you a radius, you multiplied it by 2 to find the diameter. And once I know the diameter, all I have to do then is multiply that by pi to find the circumference. So question 14, what if I know the radius? How can we find the circumference? First, we multiply the radius by 2. Because when I multiply the radius by 2, that gives me the diameter. Once I know the diameter, I simply multiply that by pi. But again, that's a lot of words. I'm going to say the same thing just using math symbols. What if I give you a radius? Well, we first take that radius and multiply it by 2. That is now the diameter. Then I take that diameter and I multiply that by pi, and that gives me the circumference. So r times 2 times pi is equal to the circumference, or we can always reverse it and write circumference is equal to pi times 2 times the radius, or any other version of that. Circumference is equal to 2 pi r. All of those are great versions of the same thing, where I'm taking the radius, doubling it, and then multiplying by pi. So on our final set of problems, I have us finding the circumference. You need to pay particular attention to what information I'm giving you, so you know if we're just going to multiply the diameter by pi, or if I give you the radius, and first we need to multiply that by 2 to find the diameter before multiplying by pi. Let's take a look at number 15. Once again, we're finding the circumference We're using our calculator's value of pi. That just means that instead of using an approximation like 3.14, I'm actually going to use the pi symbol on my calculator. And for sure, we are going to be showing our work. When all of that's done, because we're using our calculator's version of pi, there's going to be a lot of decimals. So we also want to round our answer to the nearest tenths place. Again, let's take a look at 15. The first thing we need to do is decide, am I giving you the radius or the diameter? 22 yards is the measurement given, but we can see it goes from edge through the center all the way to the other edge. That means that the measurement I am giving you is the diameter, so I'm labeling it D. And I remember, because I just wrote it on the previous page, that if I have a diameter, all I have to do is multiply that diameter by pi, and it gives me the circumference. So my diameter is 22. 22 times pi. We're going to plug that into our calculator. And we get 69.1150 and more. There's so many more decimal places that follow, but that's enough to write down because now that I have written all of that down, now I'm rounding to the nearest tenths place. Remember, our first decimal place is our tenths, so I need a number here in the first decimal place position. And I look beyond that into the hundredths place to decide what is that going to do. So here is my tenths place. My hundredths place has a 1. Is that 1 enough to bump up this one in the tenths place up? And the answer is no. So that means that my circumference is 69.1. Our units of measure are yards, so I will still use yards, 69.1 yards. Again, showing work. What does it mean to show work? It means that I might be writing the formula that I used. Perhaps I'll be writing down what I typed into my calculator. I might even write down what the calculator gives me with a bunch of different decimals before I finally round and write the final answer. This is what it looks like to show your work. You're also going to encounter another type of problem, like in number 18. Let's skip ahead to number 18 now. Again, I need to find the circumference, but I need to decide first, what information am I giving you? It's 4.4 kilometers, but what is it? Since it only goes from center to edge, that makes this one a radius. And again, on the previous page we just wrote, what do I do to find the circumference when given a radius? A radius, when multiplied by 2, is now a diameter. So imagine I had another 4.4 on the other side. That's the diameter. Once I have the diameter, just like I did before, I'm going to multiply that by pi. That will give me the circumference. Well, the radius this time is 4.4. So I'm going to take that radius of 4.4, I'm going to multiply it by 2, multiply that by pi, and that will give me the circumference. So again, remember, I have 4.4 going this way, 4.4 going in the opposite way, so altogether, that would give me a diameter of 8.8. If I do 4.4 times 2, that simplifies to 8.8 for my diameter, which I will then multiply by pi to give me the circumference. You can do this in 2 separate calculations the way that I have done, where I did 4.4 times 2. I press enter in my calculator and I get 8.8, but we need to remember we're not done. Now I'm going to take that 8.8, multiply it by pi, and I am going to get 27.64601 and so many more decimal places. And now I need to round to the tenths place. So once again, here is the tenths place. I look at the hundredths place to decide, is that 4 enough to bump the 6 up? And our rules of rounding tell us no. So the circumference on 18 is 27.6, and our units of measure are kilometers, just like they were in the initial measurement, 27.6 kilometers. Again, as I was saying, you can do just one calculation at a time. 4.4 times 2 is 8.8, then multiply it by pi, or if you're a lazy mathematician like me, I'm going to type all of that into my calculator in one shot. 4.4 times 2, don't press enter, just keep on going, times pi. And now I press enter once I have done all of that. And that is how I can get in one single calculation the same thing I got before. So again, the key to success on these problems, we're just finding circumference. So I know I need to multiply by pi, but we need to understand and pay attention to what information is given. If it goes from edge to edge through the center, then that's a diameter, and we just multiply it by pi. If it only goes from the center to the edge, then that's a radius. And I first have to multiply it by 2 to become a diameter, then I can multiply that by pi. For that set of problems, 15 through 26, read each problem carefully or read the diagram, decide what information is given, and practice finding circumference. Go ahead and pause the video for a few minutes as you practice a couple of problems. To finish up this video, we also want to know how we can work backwards. So on problems 27 through 30, you're going to notice that I'm giving you circumference on every one of these problems. So since the information I'm giving you is circumference, then I must not be looking for the circumference. 27 and 28, I'm asking you to find the diameter. So if I give you the circumference, can you work backwards and divide in order to find the diameter? In order to do this, we need to remember the relationship between diameter and circumference is d for diameter multiplied by pi is equal to the circumference, c. So if I give you the circumference and need to work backwards to find the diameter, we have to do some division. The circumference in 27 is 56.5. So in my calculator, I would be typing in 56.5. Working backwards and dividing, we divide by pi. And in my calculator, that tells me that the diameter is equal to 17.9845 and so on. Rounding to the nearest tenths place. Once again, I need a digit in the tenths place and I look at that 8 to see if that 8 is enough. And the rules of rounding say yes, the 8 is enough to bump up that 9. That 9 is then going to bump up to a 10, so I have to think about what that actually does to the number. I already have a 17 in here, but now I've got this extra 1 from the rounding, so this is going to round to 18.0 miles for the diameter. You can finish 28 on your own. Now let's take a look at 29 and 30. On 29, I'm asking you to go one step further than I did before. I want you to work backwards, but this time we have to keep on working backwards so that we can find the radius. So again, I want us to remember that the relationship is radius times 2. Continue multiplying by pi. That's what gives us the circumference. So if I give you the circumference, we know I'm starting at the end, so I'm going to have to work backwards. That means if I have 12.6, the first thing that I need to do is I need to work backwards and divide by pi. And I can press enter and do this in my calculator, or I can understand that I need to take another step, because that just gives me, when I divide by pi, that just gives me the diameter. I need to keep on going to find the radius, so I need to also divide by 2. And instead of typing that in separately in your calculator, you can type it in all in one step. So that would be 12.6 divided by pi divided by 2 is finally going to give us the radius because I worked backwards twice, and I have the radius is equal to 2.00535, rounding to the nearest tenths place. So I need a digit here, and this 0 is not enough to bump that up. So the radius would be equal to 2.0 miles. Another great way that you can look at a problem like this is again with our formulas. So if I were to begin with the formula of radius times 2 times pi is equal to circumference, if I give you the circumference, then that means I can start right here and plug that in. 12.6 is equal to radius times 2 times pi. Depending on what we've already covered this particular year in mathematics, when we're solving equations, we would undo what has happened to the variable. And right now, the variable is the radius. And we can see the radius has been multiplied by 2 and multiplied by pi. So I would undo that multiplication by dividing by pi. I can type that into my calculator, 12.6 divided by pi. Notice that the pi divided by pi will divide out, and that leaves me with the radius multiplied by 2 is equal to, and I've typed into my calculator, 12.6 divided by pi is 4.0107. But I'm not done solving. I still have the radius, which is multiplied by 2. So again, I undo that multiplication with division. Do the same thing to the other side to balance it out. And my 2's will divide out, and that leaves me, and I'm out of space, so I'm going to come over here. That leaves me with just the radius, which is equal to, and once again, I would need to type this into my calculator. 4.0107 divided by 2, which is equal to the same thing that I got before, 2.0 miles. You still have to finish up problem number 30, but the rest of this time is yours to practice working on these problems. So please make sure you devote all of the remaining time in class to finishing this worksheet, or if you're doing this on your own in preparation for a retake, then make sure you practice the rest of those problems. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.